what would be your advice to sort of start thinking in a data-driven way? I mean, if you don't have, it doesn't make sense for you to sort of hire a dedicated data person, but you sort of want to get into a mindset of being more data-driven. Where sort of, if you're a CEO, for instance, so you have the mandate at least, but you sort of don't know where to, I mean, how to start thinking about it. It's an abstract question, I realize that, but sort of,
Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, it is an abstract question, but I think you can sort of I always think it's like helpful to like kind of break down, like think just starting to think about like breaking down company success into like a set of like quantifiable metrics. I think is like a good, very good exercise for any CEO at a small stage company, or any a head of data, whatever, right? Like starting to like think about, okay, what are the metrics that I care about the most? Even if you can't measure them, like just like the fact that you're like broke it down can sometimes help you. Let's say you don't even have let's say you're just using some technology you have zero control over, and you're running an e-commerce site. Just the fact that you break it down into like, oh, I want to look at like conversion rate from this point to this point, and then from this point to this point, may actually in itself help you prioritize, because you realize the levers that you have in the business, even without like making a dashboard out of it. So I think that's always like, to me, like the most important part is like to like start to break down, okay, like what is the company trying to accomplish? Let's break it down into like a couple of like decently quantifiable things, or sometimes not quantifiable things. And then then you can start to think about, okay, well, for the metrics that I can't quantify, can I actually like start to measure them somehow? Like that would be useful.
what could be an example of that?
Something that you can't quantify. I mean, like user experience, right? Like let's say you're, I don't know, like let's say you're selling online. Let's say you're selling furniture. Like I don't know, like how do you quantify how people like or don't like the furniture? Like I don't know. Like but like clearly it's probably like a very big driver of like virality and retention. Like people who buy furniture from you and like it, they're gonna buy more. They're gonna tell their friends. I don't know. Like I don't think. I mean, you can maybe measure NPS, but I think that's like where you have to be a little bit more. Uh, I think it's fine to be qualitative in that case. Like it's fine to say, actually, my top 3 priorities for the company is like, I want to improve revenue, and I want to like improve the look and feel of this furniture. And the look and feel of this furniture is completely within the discretion of myself to perceive. And I'm gonna like go and look at all the furniture and tell you whether it's good enough. And I do that all the time, right? Like I'm, at this startup I'm doing now, like Modal Labs, like there's stuff that we can quantify, like cold starts are very important for us, like starting containers quickly. We have tons of instrumentation of that. But then there's like stuff that's like, like the Python interface just feels kind of janky. And that's like, well, how do you know? Like, I don't know, like, but I feel it. Like I write code and it's like, this doesn't feel right to me. And that's fine, right? Like I can make like the top 4, right now the top 4 priorities for this company is probably like performance, which I can't measure, stability, which I can measure, security, which I can't really measure, but I can like use like checklists and like, do like, penetration tests and stuff like that. And then like just like customer user ergonomics experience, which I cannot measure at all, but at least like, some of them are measurable.
How and this sort of brings us to a slightly sort of deeper question. I mean, how, as a manager in this type of, or I mean, in an organization where you sort of need to figure out metrics which aren't sort of super in, I mean, they make sense intuitively, but they don't make sense sort of, you can't sort of prove them. How do you manage and lead in an organization where you sort of don't really have the answers? You're sort of everyone is sort of figuring it out, I guess. And this
Yeah.
is it's a broad question, obviously, but it's sort of how can you even approach it, since in all kind of fast moving and sort of tech companies, you sort of you figure it out as you go.
Yeah, I mean, like we can take like Spotify and the recommendation system as an example. Like Spotify, like I mentioned, like DAU was like a top goal, but that was like a top line metric. And then for every team there might be more like granular metrics. Like for music recommendations, like we saw that improving DAU it was possible occasionally in A/B tests, but that wasn't even like the main metric we looked at. We often looked at just like, okay, well, like, you know, try to make this change to the recommendations, and we'll look at like, do people listen to radio more? Do people listen to radio less? Do people like give thumbs up more? Do people, we even had like actually like manual test panels. We would send them recommendations to these like students at some music school, I forget, and they would like go through like one by one and like rank them from like 1 to 5, and we looked at specifically the proportion of ones, because like we thought like the sort of WTF ratio, we wanted as few as possible, like the like oddballs, like even though like the average was high, we also wanted to make sure there's like none of these like really bad ones. And so like I think I mean, so maybe like the latter one, like that's like an interesting metric, the like what the fuck ratio, right? Like that one is like, okay, now you actually kind of broke it down into like a sufficiently like granular metric that you can almost like tell someone on the team, hey, it looks like our latest algorithm is an overall improvement in a bunch of metrics, but it looks like the what the fuck ratio went up a tiny amount. Can you take a look at why? And can you like build, algorithms that, have, I don't know, greater propensity, like, filter out these like, spurious, like bad recommendations. And that kind of turns out now it's like granular enough that you can actually give people that problem, right? That's not always the case. But like that would be like an ideal thing. It's like you start with this like higher level, like, the company needs to make money. And then you like go backwards into like proxymetric by proxymetric, and you break it down into a team like hierarchically. And then like suddenly it's like one person, you can just tell them, oh, can you fix this thing? That's sort of an ideal case, not always the case, but I like it when that happens as a manager, because you can then like, and the great thing about that sort of management is like you're not telling the person how to do it. You just tell them, can you fix this thing? Like this number is like too high. I mean, another example would be just like stability things, right? Like if you're working at a startup or building technology, and you have like there's, I don't know, latency spikes, right? Like sometimes like when you go to the website, it doesn't take 100 milliseconds to serve the website. It takes 5 seconds. That's a bad experience. Like I don't know, like what's the link to like revenue? Like there's no like obvious link to revenue, but we can all agree it's like a bad experience if you go to like an e-commerce site and it takes like 5-10 seconds to load the page. That's a janky experience. And, but now you can tell that to an engineer. You can go to an engineer on the growth team and say, hey, you're responsible for the startup time. I noticed this is like tail latency. Please fix it, because it's a bad experience for the team or for the user, right?
But then you still somehow need to come up with these metrics or these
Oh
sort
yeah,
of these KPIs,
totally.
right? I mean, so how does that? I mean, what does that process look like? It's just it's just sort of a bunch of hypotheses floating around, or I mean, would a manager say, well, I'm tasked with this. This is my objective. I foresee that these changes in metrics or these sort of key results for our team perhaps could be sort of not sure they're like one-to-one correlated, but they probably make sense. Is that sort of the way it's done then?
Yeah, I think so. And I don't think you necessarily always need to like know exactly that they're correlated. Like I think you just like if there's like a plausible, understanding of reality that like, affect, that like, thing A causes thing B. I don't think you necessarily need to know that like, slow website performance leads to fewer conversions. Like it's enough to like realize as a human that like, slow
It's
websites are
bad.
annoying, right?
Yeah.
And so and I actually think that's like a big part of like how I think of management is this is more subjective. Like maybe some people may disagree with this, but I actually think, to me, what I realize, I mean, it also reflects sort of my strengths as a manager, but it's like I think like I spend a lot of time like thinking about like, hey, what does the company need to accomplish? How do I turn that into like some set of like metrics that people understand and are granular enough that they can act on it?
And open-ended enough so that people are motivated to work on them, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. That they feel like they can own it themselves. Like I'm not like necessarily like prescribing things they have to do. That they have, those metrics should ideally also have like kind of like fast feedback loops. So you're not just, they should have like a low noise to signal ratio, or a high signal to noise ratio. So people feel like, oh, like I can build this thing and I can make an impact on this metric, you know. because people want to have that marshmallow, like they want to, they want to feel that fast feedback loop, right?